At the first line, make sure it's not
Okay, if everyone could sit down, please, or just stand quietly. All right, thank you. My name is Charlie Sykes. I'm a volunteer like almost all of us are. From Principals First, we have about 4 committees. I'm in charge of the outreach committee, so maybe you'll be hearing from me. Hopefully you will be. Thank you for coming tonight. I hope you enjoy our conversation. What is our topic? I want to make sure I say it right. A discussion on duty, honor, and country. I think you'll find it very interesting, as most of these events are. I want to turn it over now to Lynn Schmidt from St. Louis.
Thank you, Charlie. My name is Lynn Schmidt. I am a board member with Principals First, and I'm going to lead us off with saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could please stand. Now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the founder of Principals First, Heath Mayo.
All right, wow. Thank you, first and foremost, to all of you for being here today. This is just tremendous to see. As Lynn and Charlie mentioned, Principals First is a completely grassroots operation. So like everything you see, the check-in booth, the folks that talk to you about being involved in Principals First, volunteers. They got day jobs. They are here because they care about our country. They're concerned with what's happening to it. A lot of us Republicans, former Republicans, that's why we're here in Milwaukee, because we're concerned with what we see as a problematic, to put it lightly, direction of the Republican Party. We think it has strayed from a lot of its core commitments that attracted us to the party to begin with. And we think it's important to say so, because so few people seem to have had the courage to just stand up and say just some simple truths that need speaking. And so that really was the founding genesis of why this group exists in the first place, is to speak those truths at a time when it's difficult, to platform the leaders who are willing to say those things, because it's our belief that there actually is quite a number of both Republicans and just Americans generally who feel this way. You see this in the polls after polls, the choices that we have. Americans are frustrated with the state of our politics, the state of our parties, the state of the partisan primary system. There's just no shortage of problems that a serious country who is clear-eyed about the challenge it faces could address. And so that really is the spirit of Principles First. And I think it's appropriate, actually, that we're here in Milwaukee alongside the RNC, but really in the cradle, the birthplace of the Republican Party itself. If you don't know this, the Republican Party was born in 1854, just a little ways up the road in a town called Ripon, Wisconsin. Ripon, Ripon. I'm from Texas. Ripon. Ripon, I mean, it's in Texas, we call it Ripon. I mean, it's at Ripon's in Texas. I gotta spend some more time up here. Anyways, in Ripon, Wisconsin, you gotta add another P in there or something. They founded the party there. And, you know, the reason they founded the Republican Party is because the parties of the day were not responding to their principles, to the core principles that they believed in. And at that time, it was the Democrats and the Whigs, and nobody was taking a forceful stand on the question, the Whigs weren't, forceful question on the issue of slavery, that all men are created equal and that we should all be equal under the law. Their party wasn't standing for those things, and so a group of citizens got together and they broke away from their party. They put their principles first. You know, Winston Churchill once said that some men change their party for the sake of their principles, and others change their principles for the sake of their party. And I can't think of a more defining statement about the difference between the types of leaders that we have in this country and the types of leaders that we need. We need more of the first kind and less of the latter. And I'll just say, I think, and we're going to talk about this in the panels as we go. I mean, I don't know, has anybody listened to the speeches from the stage? Anybody read the platform that came out? I mean, did some people didn't even read it. I mean, did you find things in there that just seemed kind of out from left field, kind of crazy, kind of nuts? Okay, you see that? You see the raised hands. You aren't alone. Okay, this Republican Party, the party that you're hearing on the RNC stage, is not the Republican Party. It's something different. It is something very different. And it's important, and they may not say it on the stage over there, but we will say it in here. The Republican Party is sick. Okay? It has been led astray by populist demagogues, and it has abandoned its principles. We're going to talk about those principles today, but I want to just highlight a few because I think they're important. The first one, Monday night. I don't know if you guys heard this speech. David Sachs from Yammer. This guy just showed up on the scene just recently. He'd never spoken. I don't know if he's ever attended a Republican event. Gets up there and says that it wasn't Vladimir Putin's fault that he illegally invaded Ukraine and his mercenaries are raping and killing innocent women and children. It wasn't his fault. Don't blame him. It's the fault of the United States and NATO that Putin has invaded Ukraine. Okay, that is absurd. It's dangerous, and it is absolutely antithetical to anything the Republican Party has ever stood for. We are the Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall party. Okay, the fact that that would be uttered from the Republican National Convention stage is absolutely sickening. So that's number one. Abandoning the principle that America is the indispensable nation that stands for freedom and truth on the world stage. Important. Second one, Monday night as well. We had the leader of the Teamsters Union boss. I don't got anything against unions per se. But this man stood on the stage for 20 minutes and, to rousing applause, completely lambasted the ideas of free enterprise, free market, allocation of capital. It completely went to war against capitalism. It was a complete class warfare speech, pitting elites, whatever that means, against working laborers, that somehow those two groups are not, one group is less American than the other. Okay, it was a class warfare speech that I might have thought I was listening to Liz Warren. I mean, since when did we become a Liz Warren Republican Party? Doesn't make sense to me. And this one really, this last one, you hear it in a bunch of the speeches. The idea that, there are certain Americans out there, whether based on their race, their religion, their job, or their occupation, who are real Americans. They're more American than some other group, maybe a group that works at a desk job or something. Those folks they're not real Americans, or maybe the color of their skin is maybe the country of origin, they were naturalized here and they became a citizen. They're not quite real Americans. This idea that divides us, it's offensive, it is destructive, and I think it is the most pernicious new idea in the Republican Party that exists, because it goes right at the heart of what America is supposed to be. Where we all, no matter our race, religion, who we love, have the same opportunity to succeed and realize the benefits of this nation. And the Republican Party on that stage has abandoned it over and over and over again in the interest of just populist political gain, and it is infuriating. So that's the third point. We're going to unpack a lot of different ones. But it's important to raise these things because this has nothing to do. I want to be clear. Those 3 points, I didn't say the word Trump. Had nothing to do with the word Trump. Had to do with the ideas and the principles that this party is standing for and asking our votes to support. And that point, I think, has been lost. So that's part of what the effort is here at Principles First. So we're happy that you're here today to talk through and have this discussion about the differences in these principles. The last thing I'll say, what we're doing here is carrying on a long tradition in American politics. I mean, from the very beginning, people have convened in bar rooms like this one. I think of Boston, Sam Adams, Paul Revere, right from the very beginning in the cradle when this all started. Good movements in American politics begin when people come together around ideas. We've been doing it since we started. We did it in 1854, and we're doing it here again today. If we're ever going to change the country, change the parties, it's going to start just like this. And I'll tell you, the people in this room right now, I know we probably aren't happy with the Republican nominee. Hell, we're probably not happy with the Democratic nominee. Okay, we are what the pundits and the writers would say are the politically homeless. But let me tell you something about politically homeless voters who organize and get together. We are the most important and critical voting bloc in the country right now. Okay, because we have stood up and said, Republican leaders, Democratic leaders, you cannot count on our votes in November. We may have voted with you in a primary, but if you abandon our principles, you cannot count on our votes simply because you are a Republican. And that, my friends, is the only way to hold elected leaders accountable in a constitutional republic. You have to be willing to do that, or they're going to take you for granted and they're going to ignore what you actually care about. And so that's why I think this is actually the most important room in American politics, because you, Trump, Biden, any of them, they're not going to get to the White House unless they win the votes in this room. So I hope they're listening to what we talk about here today. And so I'll close and just say thank you. And the only other thing I'll say is, the momentum is picking up out there. All right, people are waking up. I hope that you leave today with a sense of hope and optimism, because it can be hard, obviously. It can be hard when things are so frustrating and dismal in our politics, so anger. I mean, obviously, the tensions are high. But I hope you leave with some optimism, because regardless of what happens in 2024, and I think we'll talk about it, I mean, we're going to have to do everything we can to make sure we keep things on the track in November. But regardless of what happens, there's going to be a tremendous leadership void in this country. The challenges that we face in this country are because we have zero leaders. Very few real leaders who are willing to talk about, tell you exactly what they believe, whether they win or lose. We need more politicians, leaders, candidates who will run for office without a single care about whether they win or lose. They need to be telling us what they believe, what they stand for, and damn the torpedoes, damn the consequences, because that's how it ought to be done in a democracy like the United States. So these rooms, and people are paying attention, okay? People in Washington, every time a Principles First room fills up like this, people take note, because exactly what I said, in November, they don't know how you're gonna vote. They don't know how you're going to vote, so every time we do this, these rooms continue to get a little bit bigger. We're not asking for your money. We're not grifting anything. I mean, we all have day jobs. All right, we're here because we care about the country, and we're thrilled that you're here to have this discussion with us. So that, I want to welcome to the stage, I think I'm welcoming Miss Brittany Martinez to introduce our first panel. I want to just say, before I introduce Brittany has taken the immense effort to put this event on for us today, just from the venue and from getting the registration set up and just getting everything lined up. Brittany has been fantastic, so I want to say thank you, Brittany, for putting this wonderful event together. Yes, please give her an applause. And so with that, Brittany, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brittany Martinez, and I want our first panelists to start coming to the stage so you can take your time getting on these high chairs. But go ahead. Yeah, thank you. So I am here, and let me try sitting as well. Okay, excuse me. So I am here, and it's maybe an interesting story compared to some folks. So I'm the traditional political operative. I've worked in Republican politics for a dozen years. Started on Capitol Hill, went to campaigns, all over the place. And most recently, I spent half a decade in Speaker McCarthy's office, and I started working with him in the minority. So I was his state communications director. Obviously, he was removed from the office of the speaker, so what that meant was that we all essentially lost our jobs, and that put me in a position where I decided what is it that I want to do with my future. And I enjoyed very much working in his office. It is immensely incredible to be able to be in that position. It's a privilege. But, there were certain things within the Republican Party that I just can't put up with anymore. That led me to Principles First. And so that's why I'm here, because I also feel politically homeless. I'm a Republican. I won't be a Democrat. I don't want to be an independent. I believe in the future of our party, but I think that we need to make some changes. So without further ado, I'm going to start introducing our panelists, if you'll excuse me for a moment. So up first, we have Amanda Stewart-Sprouse. Amanda is from Arizona and Colorado-based mom, wife, and businesswoman. Born and raised in Oklahoma, she attended college in Virginia and moved to Phoenix in the mid-1990s, where she and her husband started their accounting firm. And she is the grassroots organizer and co-chair of Haley Voters Working Group. Next, we have Stephanie Sharp. She is a Garden City, Kansas native and was elected at 26 to the Kansas House of Representatives and later to the Johnson County Community College Board of Trustees. Known for translating politics into English, she has over 20 years of Republican legislative and campaign experience and created VoteSharp.biz, voter CRM for candidates to build and manage authentic relationships. And she is a former U.S. Senate staffer, lobbyist, and radio host. And she is here on behalf of Women for Us, a great organization that focuses on center-right, low-propensity women to not vote for the former president come November. And last but not least, we have Kendall Unruh, who is a pro-family activist who's been crafting GOP and RNC platform policy for decades. She was elected to 8 RNC national conventions and served on the platform committee. As a founding board member of the Christian Coalition, she helped register and train hundreds of thousands of pro-family activists. In 2016, as an RNC Rules Committee member, she founded Free the Delegates and led a convention floor fight in an attempt to keep the former president from being the nominee. So we have some really impressive women on this panel. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm just going to get started with you, Amanda. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Haley Voters Working Group?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I really have been watching Nikki Haley's progress over the last 4 years. I assumed that she would be running for president, so I was a really early supporter. I think her politics really aligned with my politics. And I am a little bit of a real politic person, so I condone what she's doing. I'm fine with it. I am one of those people who, you know, we do still have to have people who are within the party working within the system to represent our values. So I still remain a strong Haley supporter. The reason I became, I guess, the co-chair of the Haley Voters Working Group too is that I really felt like we should very early on begin harnessing those 5 million votes, especially the suburban women's votes in those 7 swing states. It's absolutely critical, and I know that the Biden campaign needs us, and up until very recently, obviously, the Republican and the Trump campaign needs us. They know without our votes, they will lose. Arizona was really the canary in the coal mine. Maricopa County was back in 2020 and 2022. Our entire state government almost flipped completely Democrat. Why? Was it because the Democrats were running excellent campaigns? No. It was because Republicans like us simply left certain races blank. We simply did not vote. We weren't voting for the Democrat. We weren't voting for Biden necessarily. We just left those lines blank if we felt that those candidates did not align with our principles. And I think that we're going to keep seeing that unless we see movement more in a moderate centrist position. So as part of the Haley Voters Working Group, some support Biden, some are supporting potentially now Trump, and many of us like me are simply saying right now, I'm still going to write in. But we are working to get all candidates to move to the center right now.
Thank you. Stephanie, so I've heard the story that you've told that Women for Us what kind of started because you guys met each other at our Principals First Summit, which is fantastic. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that story?
So who was at Principals First in DC in February? Anybody? Okay. So it was my second Principals First event, and I attempted to be with the third, but y'all changed the date on me, and so I could not make it. But we went in February, and we had an amazing couple of days of panels of all of the folks that are here in this room. Going to talk to you later. And we were energized and excited, and then we walked away and we said, okay, we need an action step. And that's not Principals First's role. It's their job to convene, right? It's to bring all of these thought leaders together. And it's the rest of us, it's our job to be activists in our own communities. Well, two of the women that I met there, Renee LaFair and Brittany Prime, we were like, okay, well, we live in DC and Kansas and Texas. Like, what are we gonna do? And the more we talked and we continued chatting over Zoom, well, we have a specific set of skills. We can do something, even though we live in a non-swing state. We can do something, and so we started meeting with all of the usual suspects. We've had so many meetings, but in the end, we decided to form a super PAC, and that's, you all have information on your tables about Women for Us, and it's womenforus.org. If you don't live in Wisconsin, obviously, if you live in Wisconsin, we want to talk to you before you leave. We will lasso you and bring you in. If you don't live in Wisconsin and you live in a non-swing state, please go to womenforus, the number 4.org, and sign up to volunteer, because you can adopt a state and you become one of our volunteers in the swing states. Doesn't matter where you live. And there are 43 other states where there are not a billion, okay, hundreds of millions of Americans that want to do something and that believe in the principles first message. Maybe they haven't heard it, but they all are already there. They want to do something. They're not comfortable in the Republican Party anymore. They're not comfortable in the Democratic Party anymore. And if I can just for a minute, I've done political consulting for years, and I always talk about politics as not politics, it's math. There are not enough Republicans to elect Donald Trump. There are not enough Democrats to elect whoever the Democratic nominee ends up being. They have to have us. They have to have the middle. It is just math. So go to womenforus.org and sign up, and you can adopt a state for those of you who don't live in a non-swing, or for those of you who live in a non-swing state. And you become one of our volunteers, and you can do something from a state where maybe your vote matters. I have my earrings, I'm an avid pro-vote person, but our votes don't matter as much as it does in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And you become one of our volunteers, and you get assignments to do the things that all of the volunteers in those states are doing. And maybe that means that you want to take a weekend and go to Pennsylvania, and you want to go to Philly for a weekend, just a long weekend in October. I'm sure it's beautiful in Philly in October, and come and walk doors with us and go to a happy hour where everyone's voting their mail ballots. So take that opportunity and sign up, and we'd love to have your support. We'd love to have your donations. If you have wealthy friends that want to support this effort, we would love to have their support, as well as yours. And like Brittany said, this all came out of Principles First. The three of us met at the end of February, and we have just had a great time becoming friends in this process, but also taking this principled perspective out into the world and at a grassroots level, recruiting and activating Republican women to not vote for Trump in November. So that's how we all came about. Thanks.
I love it, and I think something that's really unique, and it shouldn't be unique, but it's something that's become unique within the party, and is meeting people and wanting to collaborate. And Kendall, you are a former RNC platform committee woman. You were on different committees for over 30 years. And when you're creating a platform, obviously, that includes a lot of collaboration. But for our audience, I'm sure you guys have probably heard, that's not what really happened this time around. And so I would love your thoughts on how things should probably be versus how they were. And just, if you have any opinions you'd like to share with us, I'd love to hear.
Well, I was very involved with the platform committee because I truly believed, and I'm an evangelical Christian, I think I'm the token one that is not supporting Donald Trump at this point, but yay. Without a vision, the people perish. And so everybody has a different gifting in politics, but my gifting happened to be keeping the platform very constitutional, very pro-family, and actually centered around individualism. And what you all got to witness this time around was there was no autonomy with the people who had been elected to the platform committee, if, by the way, they had been elected at all, because in many situations, especially I can speak for Colorado, we had always run for election for that committee. And it had been through a series of 5 different elections, and now they were just handed the list of who the committees were going to be. And it was done by acclamation. So no one should be surprised that Trump is acting authoritarian, because this is what authoritarianism leads to. It leads to the loss of autonomy. It leads to the loss of individuality. And I always remain shocked that people that I know and have known for literally all of my adult life, who truly always lambasted the left for behaving in that manner, are willing to become subjected to the exact same things that we always hated. And I couldn't play the game anymore. I feel like I'm speaking, my goal when I was with the Christian Coalition was to get as many pro-family activists elected, as many pro-family activists working within the Republican Party. Why was that an easy sell? Because at the time the platform remained very pro-family, so it drew those voters in. It was, not only was it the right thing to do, because I believe, as John Adams does, that our constitutional republic really can't operate without a moral and virtuous people. And so to have a North Star in the platform that keeps the focus on what is truly important is what drew people in. It helped actually build the party, it helped keep the party viable, and it certainly helped keep people getting elected on those issues. It also served as an accountability tool. If you have a set of doctrine that says this is what our policy is, when you then have elected officials veering off from that, then you can go back to them and say, this is not what, you're not representing our value system. And so obviously what you have seen is the gutting of the platform. If Trump is to do everything that this new current platform says to do, it'll be the most ginormous government we've ever seen, because it's not even possible, of course, to do everything that he's talking about in the platform. It's just strictly, basically his campaign talking points. But the bigger picture is they have taken away the reasons why people vote. And when I was on the State Central Committee, the RNC had done some polling, and there are 5 issues that people swing vote on, and this is crucial to know. One is the pro-life Catholics that are Democrats. The other are the Second Amendment. Third are the border security. Fourth are your fiscal. And the 5th was traditional marriage. So all of those, with the exception, of course, a very heavy-handed border issue, have been gutted from that platform. So the swing issues, that the swing voters that decide elections, have been taken away from the Republican Party. So they did it in a pragmatic way, thinking that they were going to win, but they actually have truly basically decided that they're going to really have to try and fight harder to get those swing voters.
Can we just give her a hand for being inside the game? And I'm going to need some help for later to take the arrows out of your back.
Thank you. I know it's a little bit of microphone hot potato up here. Amanda, back to you. So you're highly involved at a grassroots level, and that includes people from all over the country, and it's great that there's a common cause that can unite us. What would you tell those folks who feel apathetic about this election and are fatigued and might maybe want to sit this one out?
I'm just, I'm not just like a housewife in Arizona, but basically I'm a suburban mom. Kids are in college or have graduated, so I have some time. And I just really thought we had an opportunity to harness our votes. And if nobody else was going to do it, then I would put up my hand and start talking about it. And there were about 18 of us that were willing to do it and put our, names, our real names out there and put ourselves on the line and be willing to talk to media and to push the Biden campaign and hopefully the Trump campaign in an appropriate way and give a voice to those of us that were Haley voters and talk about the issues that we really cared about. And really also be open about the fact that we're just dissatisfied with the general reactionary politics that we see right now. I really, really can't express enough how suburban women hate the negativity out there. Just the constant negativity, whether it's the Republican Party that we used to be sort of the rah-rah cheerlead, let's talk about all the ways that we can do great and awesome things. Let's lift, let's all boats rise, right? We're all going to lift together. We're going to talk about school choice and how exciting that is and how it frees people in inner cities and children in inner cities to get a better education. We haven't heard that. And those are the kind of things that we need to talk about because that's what appeals to suburban moms and to suburban women. And I really do think that we're at that point where women are going to be incredibly important, not only in this election, but hopefully we can galvanize us to be more important and really to express that. You know, I was talking to Heath's mom a little bit earlier, and she was saying, you know, what are our kids looking up to? We want those good principles. I mean, honestly, in the business world, if I was doing business with somebody that was sleeping around on their wife, and then the next wife, and then the next wife, and the next wife, I wouldn't do business with that person. Is he trustworthy? No. Is he honorable? No. Will he pay his contractors? Well, no, right? There's no surprise with any of that. And I think that as women, we understand that, and as Haley voters, I think a lot of us understood that. We just want better.
I think wanting better is testing. So I think wanting better is a common theme of a lot of people in this room. And Stephanie, you know, you mentioned numbers earlier, and the numbers it takes to have a Biden or Trump campaign be successful. So for a lot of people in the room who maybe are more conservative, what do you say to those folks who are concerned with the top of the ticket, but that's not all that's at stake this year? It's the House, the Senate, we have, you know, even at the local level. So what do you tell people who have that concern, but still want to help Republicans win in Congress?
Get me talking about state and local government. That's the good stuff. Gosh, and for years, I worked almost specifically on state and local. And actually my mantra was, by the time that anything that happens in DC gets down to the rest of us, it is completely irrelevant. It is so watered down that it has very little impact on our lives. What we really should be looking at is the school board, the city council, your state rep, your state senate. And I mean, I did time, that sounds bad. I did time in state and local government at the elected level. And I mean, I know from experience, I did time. When I was on the community college board, we had me and three of my friends could pass a mill levy increase and increase your taxes tomorrow. And 99% of the population didn't know that we were elected. And so I've spent the vast majority of my career working at the state and local level. And that's the exciting stuff. You know, if you are disillusioned by the top of the ticket, work at the state and local level, because those are the Republicans that are much closer to your everyday lives. I'm trying to think of a way to turn this around to get back to women for us. But the reality is that the people that are the closest to you, and that's the way that it should be, your city council, your school board, your state rep, your state senators, city council and school board are typically nonpartisan, typically elected in odd years. So a lot of them aren't up right now. Some county officials are, but your state rep and your state senators, a lot of them are going to be up this year. Take a look at where they are on the issues. And if they are following along the lead of the head of the party, then maybe it's time to help somebody else. And I don't remember when the Wisconsin primary was. You guys may be done with your legislative primaries. It's coming up. Is it August or September? August 13th is your legislative primary. Okay, so that's a great opportunity to look at the Republican Party in your area, and are there alternatives that are more traditional Republican and that are not following the Trump lead? Because there is, I see it, and I'm sure that you all see it too, it is slowly turning around away from, like back to what we would consider to be more traditional Republican views. And the reality is that for those of us that have been in party politics for a long time, and I mean decades, this isn't the Republican Party that we came to. It's not the Republican Party platform, certainly, that we all dedicated our careers to. And so there is that opportunity to get involved, contact your state rep. I guarantee you, you call them, you email them, Google their name, their information is easy to find. You get involved with their campaigns, they will have work for you that will make an impact on a daily basis. They will give you a list of people, 100 doors in your zip code that you can go walk, your neighborhood. 100 doors you can do in 3 hours of walking. That's it. So there is still an opportunity to work for Republicans that represent your values and get those people in the pipeline, get them through these primaries and get them to the general election. They are more likely to win a general election than the opposition. Neocon, I don't know what we call them now, but yes, that's get involved, get involved, get involved. There's always an opportunity there.
Thank you. And Kendall, I have another question for you about platform stuff. And, you know, how important is it for Republicans to work with each other from all across the political spectrum, from conservatives to moderates? I think that something that we've seen lost in the Republican Party, unfortunately, is that we used to take pride in being a big tent party. I don't really think that's the case anymore. So I would love your thoughts on that.
That's a good question, because I've been asked that a lot when I was working so hard to make sure that the platform remained very constitutional, very pro-family, very conservative. This isn't legislation, remember, this is the principles of a party. And when that North Star, that anchor that defines where a party is at, remains constitutional, remains focused on the things that truly are the most important issues, of course, the fundamental right to life remains one of those. And if there's a variance within the party, which there always is, part of remaining moral and virtuous is the fact not that you just bang somebody over the head with your personal views, but part of being moral and virtuous is having temperance. And that is actually what I have really grieved over, watching all of my friends morph into people that are unrecognizable to me. Because these are the people, remember, so many of them are churched, and what they say they believe and how they act are diametrically opposed. And I've watched this transformation happen, and I question, was it always in them and now suddenly they have a green light to be able to release it? Or have they truly just been transformed through this whole process? But the most grievous thing to me was I was reaching out to family members and friends who were still at the National Convention, who truly have made careers out of the pro-life industry. And for decades, they have been saying they cared. They cared about the moral issues. And now what you hear is the Trump talking point of platforms don't matter. And I know that most people wouldn't have read a platform, but again, it was a tool that was able to be used to help recruit. It was a tool to win on. It was a tool to hold elected officials accountable. And now you see people that truly have spouted one thing forever are now doing the exact opposite. And I personally am not going to be able to vote for Donald Trump. I've left the party because I actually believed all of the things that I worked for and all of the things that I said. And I understand there's always going to be divergent opinion, but I will tell you the importance of a party, though, to be able to legislate and protect the least of these. And I don't need to get into the whole debate about that, but I think is one of the most crucial things that a party can protect.
Thank you. And before we end here, would love to take one or two audience questions. If anyone has a question for one of our panelists, don't be shy.
With the projection of Trump winning, is there any thought of getting involved in the Senate races? Because being able to, you know, I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen.
Yeah, so there's crazy, and there's normal. And so in Arizona, we've got about 2 more weeks to go. I want to say we have 90% of our ballots are early ballots, which is great. Great. In theory, Republicans, we love that, right? Because we actually have jobs, so we like to vote early. But that's really kind of where we are right now. So hopefully, I think the biggest thing is to try to work right now for Senate candidates during these primaries and see what we can do. Otherwise, as a Republican, I think it's going to be a challenge. It's really going to be a challenge. And I think the Biden's administration coming out talking about some changes with Supreme Court, that kind of, that sort of throws me right now, to be honest with you, because I'm not really sure I would want to vote for a Democrat to be in the Senate because I don't want shenanigans, I like my Constitution just the way it is, no changes, please. So that's kind of where I am, but will that mean that I'm going to vote for Carrie Lake? Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. So I'm going to be, so in Arizona, it's probably going to look exactly like it did in 2022, where Republicans just dipped out. A lot of Republicans, just like us, dipped out in Maricopa County, suburban Republicans. That's what we're going to do. Just because we can't do it. We just can't do the performance artists. I don't even know what Carrie Lake stands for. Hopefully Mark Lamb, he's a sheriff, he's dealing with border issues. He's probably more conservative than I am, but that's fine. At least I know what he stands for. So the other one little tidbit that I did want to kind of pass in is that I really loved your comment about temperance. I'm a pro-choice Republican, so I've been, kind of in the minority for a long time, but I think there was always that sense of mutual respect, and that's gone. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing up temperance.
Well, CD3 in Colorado, Lauren Boebert is going to be my congresswoman. I actually truly thought about, if I could run as an independent against her to split some type of a vote to make sure she lost. But there were 5 other Republicans that were running in the primary, so they all did that, and so she won the primary. So, and the way the numbers are, talking about math, there's just, at this point, no conceivable way that a Democrat's going to win. So, I personally am not going to be able to ever vote for a Democrat either, just because I would look at that as hypocritical. If I truly was making my decisions voting for people based upon, are they moral, are they virtuous, what do they represent to a value system that I share, and then I left the party because I feel like they just don't do that anymore, and they certainly have elected the most immoral man probably in the history of the presidency, and I certainly couldn't do that with the Democratic Party either. I am truly politically homeless. I honestly, I vote third party. I write in. I know that those ballots are counted, and if they're cast and it's not cast for one of the major parties, that still sends a message. So I think that's important for people to vote their conscience. And I don't dictate another person's conscience. That's between them and God. But I am going to be active and going into churches trying to remind them that it's not about winning. It's not about numbers. It's about standing for righteousness on righteousness' sake and not being so fearful of the opposition, because there's an entire grift that goes on, and it's done with the media. And I remember going to the seminars in Washington, D.C. back when I was an activist, and they would teach you to grab an issue, to accentuate it, to exaggerate it, and to drive fear in the voter, because that is what gets people to the polls. I refuse to operate that way, even though I worked on dozens of campaigns, because I don't believe in manipulating people. But you certainly all see that today, and that is what is driving people to the polls. So I want to remind them, especially as Christians, if they're claiming to be Christians, they should never be driven by fear. And that decision should not be something that they're voting upon, but especially, if they are saying that they believe and they carry the banner of Christ, that they should by no means be trying to say that Trump represents their value system, because in a bigger worldview, from my worldview, it's not about the politics here and now, but I will tell you what has happened is because of the double-minded hypocrisy that the entire world is seeing with the American church supporting Donald Trump, because he would not have gotten elected without the church. He just simply wouldn't have. And he's playing them, by the way. I know that he certainly knows that he's manipulating them, and Steve Bannon has actually admitted such. I was told such in 2016. But, unless they truly have their eyes open, that the damage that they're truly doing and the hypocrisy that they're doing, the next generation is looking at the hypocrisy and saying, we don't want anything to do with your church and your God. And so ultimately, in my opinion, and in my belief system, it's actually shrinking the kingdom of heaven, because people truly are turning against a church when times get hard, they should be turning towards it. And that's what this politic and this political system and this whole climate has done.
Can I get an amen?
Well, more questions? Okay, one more, yes.
I'm from Australia, and we have compulsory voting in Australia. Here you don't. It seems to me is that if you have a lot of apathy at this election, it cancels both sides. So if a lot of independents say this is terrible, I don't want either one, then they don't vote, and then it becomes a fight between which side can hold their base as much and get motivated on both sides. Is that a fair enough assessment? And also, have any of you voted for Trump at all in your life? In 2016 or twice? Wow. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You probably don't need that, but I'm an anti-Biden voter. So, or I was an anti-Biden voter. I like that free market. I'm a lift all boats kind of person. So, anyway, so I did. I voted for him twice. I've been to the rallies, I was in the front row, right beside Senator Lee. So, I've been there, and, it really was it was really a campaign not for Trump, but against just Democratic policy. I do, to your question of apathy, I always like to get in an Uber and ask the driver, to me, which are, kind of free market folks, what they think. And the two different young men that were driving me today, they both were really, they're not apathetic, but they are, they're torn right now. They're torn.
Thank you. And so we're going to have to wrap up this panel. I'm sorry, I see a few more. But before I hand it over to Heath, I just want to say thank you again to our panelists so much for your commentary and thoughts today here. And I also want to note that, as we have this room filled with folks who are like-minded, and maybe sometimes we feel as though we're in the minority. As though we're in, do I need this? As though we're in the minority.
I'll just yell. And perhaps sometimes it feels like we're in the minority, that there aren't a lot of folks who think like us anymore. The truth is they are thinking like us. And the difference between the people in this room, our panelists, our attendees, and the folks across the street is that everyone here has a backbone and they don't, because they're having the same conversations behind closed doors and saying the exact same things. I know that a lot of us say that all the time, but I've been in the room where it happens, so literally they are having the same conversation. So thank you for being here, for being brave.
Working now? Thank you for being here and being brave. Thank you to you guys, and I'll hand it over to Heath Mayo.
Thank you. I think we'll just try to see if this will work. Yeah, we'll just save it.
Okay.
In case. Good. All right. If the next two panelists want to make their way to the stage, we will get this one started. And next two panelists, if they aren't aware, there they come. Please join me in welcoming our next two panelists, Mr. Joe Walsh and Mr. Charlie Sykes. Then that way I can pass the mic. All right. Well, I will give a little bit of introduction, but I'm sure everyone in this room probably doesn't need much of an introduction for either of these two gentlemen. Their record precedes them. But on my right, and I should say they're both Midwesterners, so they both we now both know how to pronounce Ripon, Wisconsin.
Right.
So.
I'm gonna give Pete shit for that for the rest of his life.
This panel will also be louder, I'm sure. I don't think Joe needs a microphone. But Mr. Charlie Sykes, long time, obviously Wisconsinite, conservative talk radio host. You know him probably best from his board podcast that became, from zero to hero, basically from scratch because of his insightful commentary day in and day out. Much deserved respite. Now I'm sure you're enjoying the time. I see your dogs on the lake. Love your Twitter account. I'm sure everyone here follows it. So we're delighted to have him, and obviously Mr. Joe Walsh, former candidate for president of the United States for the Republican nomination. He fought that fight. Was also a member of Congress, and now hosts the White Flag podcast that many of you probably have already heard. What I want to do is, I hope this becomes just a free-flowing conversation, and I think we'll probably unpack the principles and the politics of this moment. But I want to just start and just kind of give the floor to each of you, and Charlie, we'll start with you, about just this moment, your perceptions on the RNC. You've seen a lot of these over the years, you've been involved with them. What is your take on the direction of the party? We probably long reached the point of no return, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on where we sit.
Well, thank you very much. And by the way, welcome to Milwaukee, for those of you that are just visiting us. This is a great time to visit. Don't come back in February, just warning you. Okay, deep breath here, because I know Heath said he wanted people to leave optimistic tonight, and I did wonder whether, does that mean you want me to be on the panel? Because okay, so I don't think that we can overstate the enormity of the moment that we are in right now, or the seriousness of the threat. The party that is meeting down the street is undergoing a wrenching change, abandoning decades of support for free markets, for internationalism, and certainly it's a full-throated rejection of Reaganism, but also of long traditions of decency. And I want to keep coming back to this because I'm a little obsessed with the fact that this is a party that is very, very clearly intending on forcibly deporting perhaps 10 million human beings when they get into power, which means that we may be a couple of years away from one of the great humanitarian disasters of our time. We've got to talk about it, okay? So I guess my reaction is that the threat is very, very real, and anybody that thinks that the fever's going to break or they're going to return to normal anytime soon is completely wrong. For years, we've been talking about the cowardice of Republicans, that they say something in private as opposed to in what they say in public. I'm no longer sure that's true. I think that long enough, if you embrace mendacity long enough, you internalize it and it becomes who you are. And I don't think we should be in denial. That is what the Republican Party has become. And I want to throw out an idea because I'm actually trying to work it through in my head, which is always probably a mistake. That we talk about the founding of the Republican Party in 1854 here in Wisconsin. Of course, that was when the Whigs were breaking apart over slavery. I feel we're in kind of an 1850s mode here, but also it's very possible that traditional conservatives who believed in free markets, internationalism, small government, and constitutionalism, what if it turns out that we are the Whigs? That in fact, this party is making a pivot to be something that we may not recognize, but that's what the Republican Party is. So let's think about the threat of Donald Trump for just a moment. I was on a panel earlier today, and I have to admit, it felt surreal because we were talking about the horse race. We were talking about like what will happen in this state. What are the polls saying? What does J.D. Vance bring to the ticket? And I had this moment of thinking, okay, I'm tired of using the phrase, this is not normal. But people, this is not normal. And I really apologize for the language here, but we cannot overstate how fucked up it is that the Republican Party is about to nominate a convicted felon, twice impeached, a man who is a serial liar, has been found liable for raping a woman, not talking about it, but doing it. He's a convicted felon who faces multiple other charges and who disgraced himself and his presidency by inciting a violent attack on the U.S. Capitol in which police officers were attacked and beaten and died. And yet this party down the street is ecstatic and delirious in embracing him. There is nothing normal about this moment. And there's nothing normal about what Donald Trump and the Republican Party, which is in lockstep with him, is saying that they will do in Trump 2.0. So I'm not understating how crucial this election is, because obviously it is immensely crucial. But I think that we need to also realize that the fever is not going to break, that whatever happens in November is not going to end this fight, and that we need to sort of gird ourselves for a decades-long fight, maybe a generational struggle for liberalism against illiberalism, and I mean that with a small L, because we are seeing a transformation. And just one last comment. The assassination, is Donald Trump the luckiest politician ever in the history of America? You think about the winning streak that he's on. The Supreme Court tells him basically you're immune. Yes, screw all that stuff about nobody above the law. You're above the law. A few days later, that disastrous debate, which was not one bad night. It was a transformative event, and we'll deal with that a little bit later. And then, of course, you have the assassination attempt, which, quite frankly, is an iconic moment. Don't downplay it. Don't look away from it. It is perhaps the defining moment of the 2024 election, and for Donald Trump, it means that he can be a hero and a martyr at the same time. It is a great moment for him. And we are now looking at the prospect of this man who ought to be excluded from any office of public trust in America. There's no corporation that would hire him as a CEO or put him on the board. There's no school that would give him a principalship. And yet, this man is poised to return to the Oval Office. This is a moment of genuine crisis, and anybody that talks about this political moment as somehow a normal challenge is missing all of that. So I'm just going to tee this up, and I'm guessing that I'm the moderate voice here tonight with Joe Walsh.
Oh!
Okay, Joe Walsh, take it away.
Hey, everything Charlie just said, and before I amp it up, courage. Political fucking courage is a rare thing these days. Charlie Sykes deserves a huge round of applause. Because he stood up in the public square and he said, I'm going to speak the truth, I'm going to say what's right, and he knew, Charlie Sykes knew when he said that, his radio show was done. So few politicians stand up and say, that man is unfit, because if you're a Republican and you say that publicly in the public square, you are done as a Republican. Let's cut to the chase. Everything Charlie said. 3.5 years ago, that jackass tried to overthrow an American election. First president in the history of this country that lost an election and refused to concede, refused to participate in the peaceful transfer of power. I don't want to get into tariffs, and I don't want to get into tax policy. I don't want to get into any policy fight about where we disagree with him. You either believe in this moment that he is a threat to our democracy or you don't. Stop there. There's nothing else to speak about. He stood in front of the country a month ago and he said, if I lose, I won't accept the results. His son, Don Jr., what a punk that guy is. Don Jr. was asked yesterday, if for some reason your daddy loses, why would that be? He said, because it was stolen. That's an attack on this democracy. You either believe it, folks, or you don't. And if you believe it, you have to vote for the only person who can defeat that man. And that's the Democratic nominee, no matter who the hell it is. None. Doesn't matter. Last point. My younger brother has a dark outlook right now. I have a darker outlook. Republican Party's done. I come from the base. I come from the Tea Party base. I voted for Trump in 2016. I talk to the base every day. This party's gone. Done. It is what it is. And those of you who believe in democracy, and you believe in the rule of law, and you believe in the Constitution, and you believe in freedom and limited government, we're going somewhere else. We got to defeat this dictator this November. But then, as Charlie, Heath, and I have talked about, and Michael Steele, my other hero back there, has talked about, something else is coming after this election. This party's done.
I want to focus in on what you said there at the end about where we go from here, right? I think we've well surfaced the threat and the challenge of what we face this November, but December's coming, and January will come after that, and we're still going to be here. What do you think, Joe? I mean, you've thought a lot about this. You ran for president, trying to organize, a voting bloc around these ideas, and whether it's because of the party primary system or something else, it's growing out there. We sense it. We sense the frustration. But where do we go? What are the issues, the ideas that we can organize around, and how do we actually make a dent in the system with practical effect when it seems like he just keeps winning elections in Republican primaries?
I'll tee Charlie Sykes up. I'll be brief. I think we just lack imagination. We really do. Remember the 9/11 Commission came out with their report 8 months after that horrific act of terror, and they said the biggest problem was our intelligence community just couldn't imagine people would fly planes into buildings. We sit here today and we think, as Charlie said, this is just normal stuff. The Republican Party's a little off the rails. They'll come back. Everybody doesn't like Trump privately. This will work itself out in a cycle or two. Use your imagination. I firmly believe that we are living in revolutionary times. I firmly believe that change is coming. I think there's a decent chance, because there are too many of us. The Republican Party continues to shrink. It does. The Democratic Party has their issues. There are a lot of people in this country who are homeless. They got to go somewhere after November, and I think they're going to. Use your imagination. There's going to be a third party, a fourth party. We're going to change the way we run elections. We're going to change the way we vote. After this election, there's going to be a huge marketplace, I think, in reform.
The hell if I know. What's going on? I actually do agree that we're in a revolutionary period, and it is extremely uncertain where we're going. But again, this point about failure of imagination is crucial, because and I think this has been one of the things that we've seen, that you couldn't imagine that Donald Trump would actually try to overthrow the election, right? You couldn't even imagine. I remember when I first told people on my podcast, Donald Trump, that if he loses in 2020, could run in 2024. If I were to tell you now that I think he's going to run again in 2028, would you think, well, that's crazy? Well, okay, maybe we need to recalibrate what we think of as possible. I would say this, that as we look back over the last 8 years, and when I say I don't know, it's because, and by the way, I do have very few really good skills. One of my really good skills is sleeping. But at 3:30 this morning, I woke up and I'm thinking, fuck me, where are we going on this? What is going to happen? And I think part of it is to really think through, honestly, with radical clarity, how did we get here? Because none of us really thought it was possible. And I'm walking through the halls of that RNC convention, and it's a surreal experience, even having been at Cleveland to see what's happened to this. And I guess I'll give you a couple of just pieces of advice that we really do need when we talk about principles, to stick with the principles, because if this is a long-term fight, at some point we're going to have to not become what we hate. We need to actually stand for something. And the other thing is, and I think this was kind of a shock to a lot of people, we spent a lot of time talking about how the right had created their own bubble. The right had created its alternative reality silos, which became impenetrable because of the media. Big theme of my book, How the Right Lost Its Mind. And I have to tell you that I worry that the left is going to create its own bubble, its own alternative reality silo, and the Democrats did that when it came to the donkey in the room, the question of whether or not Joe Biden was going to be able to defeat Donald Trump. We've spent 8 years talking about the absolute existential necessity of keeping Donald Trump out of the White House, and yet suddenly we wake up a couple of weeks ago and realize, wow, we apparently have not worked out exactly how to do this because we didn't listen to the warnings. We did not trust the evidence of our own eyes. And you have to ask yourself, why was I not willing to see that? What did I miss? Am I in a bubble too? Because this is a dangerous thing. Because if we're in a silo, then we don't understand what our fellow Americans are thinking. We don't understand why some things are happening. And I'm going to, give a compliment back to Joe, because Joe does something that is really quite extraordinary. He really tries to have these discussions across the ideological lines in order to make people listen to one another, because one of my experiences is that you go to, say the MSNBC green room, and it is shocking how many people have never heard a conservative idea, really do not know why anyone would be a Republican. But I've also, been among conservative Republicans who have no idea what Democrats actually do or think. And I think this is part of the bubble. So we are in an uncharted territory where the media ecosystem rewards the most extreme voices, rewards outrage. Donald Trump is a creature of a transformed media information environment, and that's not going away anytime soon. So I don't know what happens next. I think this is one of those moments where we have to say, what do we actually believe? Are we making intelligent decisions? And how can we not become what we most fear?
So I'll do one more, and then I think this will get really interesting once we open it up for questions, so be thinking of your questions. I want to follow up on what you both touched on there, which is building something that people can come to, right? Because at the end of the day, we do live in a constitutional republic. We live in a democracy where we're going to elect our leaders, and it may very well be that Trump wins in November, a lawful vote of our citizens, and we have to grapple with that. And if we're going to heal the country and fix it afterwards, we're going to have to make the case to people who voted for Trump, even this year. The coalition that replaces him, whatever political movement it is, has to be additive, and it has to be coalitional, and it has to be serving something that Americans of all stripes are willing to buy. I'm curious, Joe, you had these conversations when you ran for president against him. You went to Iowa. You were at the pizza ranches. What are those things, those ingredients? I mean, we can talk about the principles, obviously, and there's an element of just you need leaders out there who are charismatic and can convince people and make the case. But is there a way, I mean, I guess the way to put it most simply is, is there a case to be made to Trump voters after Trump? You know, what is it that we can sell, that we can pitch to them about our principles, the case to be made that they've been sold a bill of goods and that this is actually what is most beneficial for the country?
It's a great question. It's a tough question. I just echo what I think Heath and Charlie are both saying. For everybody in this room younger than me, this is going to be a long fight. I do believe we're living in revolutionary times. I think the two-party system is done. We just don't see it yet. We don't see it. What is it, Heath? You said this morning 49% of Americans identify as independent now. Maybe a quarter identify as... Folks, we're going through something we haven't seen in 160 or 170 years. So use your imagination. I'm not... my good friend Heath Mayo and my good friend Charlie Sykes are good, solid, traditional Reagan conservatives. I'm a jerk. I'm a Tea Party populist. I am a populist. We're living in a populist moment. And I don't think many people in this room really understand that. The Democratic Party doesn't understand that. Trump did. The American people are really angry. The Republican Party base has been really angry for a long time. Tea Party jerks like me helped to inflame them, but the Republican Party establishment ignored them. And along came Trump in 2015, and he said, I'm going to build a wall and keep brown and black people out, and away he went. Recognize the anger, the legitimate anger among Republican Party voters, but voters across the spectrum. A lot of people are going to vote for Trump this year who aren't Republicans. A lot of working class folk who are pissed off at both parties, pissed off at what they say, all this crazy gender stuff, Joe. All this crazy marriage stuff, Joe. All these culture issues that most Americans are right down the middle intolerant on, but we got to talk to people. So I think, Heath, we've got to, us good, principled conservatives who believe in freedom and limited government and free markets and free trade and tolerance and all the rest, we got to figure out a way to present these ideas to the average guy or girl out there who is really angry at a political system that's let them down. We need our principles to meet this populist moment. It's an angry moment, and it's going to continue for a while.
So one of the good things that has happened, I'm searching for something positive to say. One of the really positive things that has emerged, though, have been these unusual coalitions that I think are represented here in this room. The people who would never have talked to one another or worked with one another, who realize that we may differ about ideology, but we don't differ about these fundamental principles, and that's what Principles First is about. And I have found some of the discussions across ideological lines to be among the most positive experiences that I've had. And, you know, Democrats willing to put aside their differences with conservative Republicans and work with them. It's not always easy. In fact, there are real strains because it means you don't talk about certain things. I imagine that some of you in this room are longtime liberal Democrats who might have been a little uncomfortable with the talk about the right to life and traditional values about marriage. But at some point, we have to prioritize, what do we think is most important? Are we willing to work with people that we used to hate? By the way, in Milwaukee, you know, on a regular basis, I had people who say, I really hated your guts for several years, but perhaps we can work together, and I'll go back to hating your guts. But this is also one of the things that I think is positive. And whatever form this takes, I do think that there will have to be this new sort of, I think, accommodation of one another. And I think this relates to it, because for those of us that think that we are this sort of weird, you know, group of misfit toys, which we are, but that we're somehow the people who are left out. I mean, the party's down the road. We're the people who are not at the party. But you know who else is not at the party? The former Speaker of the House of Representatives, the vice presidential nominee from 2020, used to be a dominant political figure in Wisconsin, Paul Ryan. Mitt Romney, the nominee of the Republican Party in 2012, is not at this party. Liz Cheney is not at this party. Adam Kinzinger is not at this party. Mike, I was working up to that. Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States under Donald Trump. George Bush, the former Republican President of the United States. All of these people are basically saying, we're not there. We're not part of this. That tells me that every time you're tempted to think, I'm just here on this island, and what's wrong with me? That's not the right question. There's nothing wrong with you. You are not the crazy ones, right? The problem is what those folks have been willing to do, jettisoning their principles. Now, here's another thing about the revolutionary era that we're in. Look, nothing in politics lasts forever. If Republicans do win, they will overplay their hands. They cannot help themselves. They are, because think about, they are stocked with the most radical, reckless extremists in the party. How is that going to work out? What could possibly go wrong, right, when they do that? And also, someone like a J.D. Vance. And by the way, I was on a panel where people were talking about him, pulling himself up by his bootstraps and his populist, and how he's going to appeal to working class people in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And I thought, really? Are we going to do this? Because you know who J.D. Vance is? J.D. Vance is an ideologue, but he's a man of absolutely no principles whatsoever. And that's a flaw. Not to mention that all of this phoniness about the working class and populism, J.D. Vance is the oligarch's bitch. He is a creature of Peter Thiel and other billionaires who say, he's our guy, we're going to prop him up, and we're going to put him into power. Now the question is whether or not people will see through that, people will reject it. I don't know. I can't predict it. But my long experience of history is that people without a moral core and without principles are very, very dangerous, but they're also very fallible. And I think that one of the things to wait for sometimes is be careful what you wish for. Because if the Republicans do 1/10 of what they are promising from the podiums here in Milwaukee, if they do 1/10 of that, there's going to be a tremendous, I think, disillusionment of Americans who go, I thought I was just giving a big middle finger to the Democratic establishment. I didn't sign up for this or this or this.
All right, questions? We'll start with Mark.
I've actually gotten an audible optimism from hearing the two of you talk, which may surprise you. But it's that you're both constantly talking about the revolution, the future, what happens later, what happens next. I was coming into this thinking, if Trump wins again, democracy could be finished, and there is no next. But it sounds like you guys believe that there is a next. So I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Well, my next could be fighting to save democracy for the next 10 years. Yeah. Oh boy, don't underestimate the threat. Use the imagination. If he gets elected, he's going to try to stay in office beyond 4 years. If he gets elected, he's going to go after his political opponents. If he gets elected, he's going to try to shut down media he doesn't like. And I'm just starting. So yes, our job as people who believe in freedom, limited government, the rule of law, and democracy, our job the next 10 to 12 years could be just defending democracy. We're at the cusp of, we're at the beginning of, I think, a revolutionary period in America. I think when we come out of it in 4 to 10 to 15 to 20 years, we're going to have very different political parties. I think a lot's coming down the pike, but job one is we either believe it or not, and I'm not going to force you to believe it. And what's been really interesting, Charlie Sykes and Joe Walsh and George Conway and Michael Steele, a lot of these very prominent never-Trumpers, pretty damn quickly after that debate, a lot of us publicly and privately said, uh-oh, we got a problem, Houston. And many of us went public. Love you, Joe Biden. Love what you did 4 years ago. Love that you beat Trump. Love all you've done these 4 years. But I got one thing on my mind right now. Trump's got to lose. I don't care about anybody's feelings. I don't care about anybody's pride. We can't let that man win. And so a lot of us never-Trumpers have been very public about, respectfully, maybe another nominee. I've been stunned by the number of Democrats I've spoken to privately in the last 3 to 4 weeks who've said, Joe, maybe this threat to democracy thing isn't really there. I had one Democratic member of Congress tell me, well, you know, Joe, if Trump wins, 26 is going to be a huge Democratic year. Swear to God. And 28 will set up was Josh Shapiro and Big Gretsch out of Michigan will set up our candidate for 28. And I paused for that long. And I said, but do you believe he's a threat to democracy? And he hemmed and he hawed. So you either believe it or not, but that could be our job for the next 10 to 12 years.
I just want to make one contrarian point that I'm not sure that voters understand what we talk about when we say a threat to democracy. And I think that that's a code for a lot of other things. You know, liberal constitutional republic values. It's a code for the rule of law, a code word for the rule of law, for a sort of a fundamental decency. So I do think that we need to apparently sometimes rethink some of the terminology we use with the voters, and I do think we need to listen to them. Okay, this may actually sound naively optimistic, but and Joe spends time dealing with people who vote for Donald Trump as well. There's a weird disconnect in this country where that you're voting for this man who has embraced cruelty and brutality and mendacity and corruption and racial hatred, but in their own lives, they're honorable, decent, family people who would never behave remotely like Donald Trump. So we used to use this phrase, throw it around, the coalition of the decent. I just think there's a fundamental decency in American life that will be profoundly disillusioned by what is coming over the next few years. And I guess I have that hope. I don't expect voters to say, well, you know, this is all about democracy, because the other side thinks it's about democracy too. And Donald Trump may be elected president democratically. So there are other values, other principles that I think that we also need to emphasize. Decency, honor, trustworthiness, all of the things that Donald Trump will never be able to live up to.
One more.
In 2020, we had a coalition that defeated Donald Trump, and maybe without focusing on who the particular Democratic candidate is, but you can if you want to. What is the new coalition in 2024? How might it be different? Can you imagine, be positive and imagine that Trump gets defeated in November? What does that coalition of voters look like?
I'll be interested in Charlie's take on this. It was an amazing coalition that helped Biden win in 20, from conservative never-Trumpers all the way over to far-left progressives. Biden, or whoever the nominee is, has a huge problem right now in energizing their base, in energizing their center-left and their far-left and their voters who are young, Gen Z, and all the rest. I think the never-Trump aspect of that coalition has broken up as well. I think there are plenty of never-Trumpers, principled conservatives who cannot and will not vote for Biden or whoever the nominee is, and there are plenty of them who will now vote for Trump. I think Trump made a stupid play picking J.D. Vance. I smiled when he picked J.D. I would have been deflated if he picked Rubio or Youngkin or even Nikki Haley. I just would have thrown my hands up and said, we're probably done. But I do think the never-Trumper aspect of the coalition is not nearly as unified as we were in 20, and that's going to hurt.
Well, this is descriptive rather than predictive, okay? The coalition has to be very much like the coalition in 2020. What does that mean? It means that it has to be former Republican voters, maybe swing voters, if you describe, in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Detroit, and Milwaukee, the wow counties, where Republicans who may vote for other Republicans on the ballot, but will not vote for Donald Trump. So you have that suburban vote. You also need the coalition of people who care about abortion and reproductive rights. This was a huge issue in 2020. It will be a big issue this year as well. That's part of the coalition. But in order for it to work, the Democrats are going to have to stop the hemorrhaging of the working class vote. They're going to have to stop the hemorrhaging of the white working class vote. They're also going to have to stop, well, not so much the hemorrhaging as find a way to inspire young people and what they thought was the demographic future, Hispanic voters, African American voters. Now they're going to win those voters, but right now they are demoralized. They are not engaged. So that coalition is not just convincing people to vote for them, but to motivate them as well. Here in Wisconsin, you know what the math is here, right? Big giant vote out of Dane County. Don't have another undervote in Milwaukee. Big vote out of Milwaukee. Hold Republican margins down in the WOW counties, and hopefully hold down the growing Republican majorities in rural Wisconsin. So it has to look like that. But at some point, that also means that it has to be energized, because I have the feeling, I have the 2016 vibe, where Americans just hate this choice. They are exhausted. They are disengaged. They do not want to deal in politics. And that's an environment for Donald Trump. And so something's got to happen to change that.
Sure. One more quickie. The one thing we all know, everybody in this room should know, there are more people in this country who oppose Trump than support him. That's just a fact. Getting them out to vote is a different thing. Second point, for the 6 years, I've spent most of my day talking to low information voters in the middle who can't stand either party. And for 6 years, tens of thousands of them have all told me the same thing. Joe, I know Trump's an asshole, and I know Republicans are jerks, but Democrats are elite snobs who don't understand me. And most of those people will vote for the asshole instead of the elite snob who doesn't understand them. Don't forget, the Democrats have a real messaging problem here.
I might do one last quick question. Sure. Yeah.
I just heard Tommy Thompson this afternoon, and he was talking about Wisconsin coming together, and we really have been kind of a leader in terms of getting our bipartisanship when he was the governor and worked with Tony Earl and getting W-2 done. Do you think there is a way now that we can bring our parties together, whether it's a new candidate or somehow coming together, where we can come together as a state, as communities, and as a country?
Quick thoughts to close it out.
Well, I love Tommy Thompson. I call him every year on his birthday, and there's no chance we're going back to that world. It is done. This is the Wisconsin that exists after 2010 is not a bipartisan work together state. In fact, we sort of modeled that hyper-partisanship, hyper-tribalism here. I, of course, was part of that, but I see very little appetite to go back to the kind of thing. I mean, Tommy Thompson, you have to understand, was elected governor, Jim, was it 4 times? 4 times? And you look at the map, there's no resemblance to this. He did very well in Milwaukee County. He won Democratic areas. He did extremely well. But that era of politics is dead and gone.
Agreed.
Excellent. And with that, please give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And now I want to welcome our next keynote speaker. He is someone you all know, who you've seen, no doubt, and who was not too long ago the man that was running this entire show here at the RNC. He's someone that I greatly respect and admire as a public leader. He obviously now has a show on MSNBC The Weekend where he has a lot of good commentary there and stays in the fight. He was obviously also the Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. Please welcome to the stage for keynote remarks, Mr. Michael Steele.
Thank you very much. Does that work? This is better? Okay, cool. What's up, everybody? Really? Seriously? y'all left your homes. You've come to Wisconsin to hang out and have a conversation. And I ask you what's up, and you're like, Well, it's a real treat to be here. I don't know how I follow Joe and Charlie, because I hope you appreciate why I got on a bus and tried to get, and did get Joe elected in 2010. And why Charlie has been such a resonant voice for Republicans, not just here in Wisconsin, but across the country. Really do appreciate their leadership and their commitment to leveling up the conversation. So that's what I'm going to do. Level it up. I don't know what the hell is wrong with anybody in this room right now. I don't know what the hell your problem is. I don't know why you have questions or doubts. I don't understand why anybody outside this room is sitting here wondering, what am I going to do this November? So I don't know what the hell your problem is. You need to explain it to me because I don't get it. You need to help me understand why this moment does not move you to take a step for your country. To give a damn long enough to say I've had enough of what we've been going through. The President of the United States currently serving is 81 years old and he has COVID. The former president who's running against him is 78 years old and is not worth the paper his name is written on. Why? Because he doesn't care about you in this room. He doesn't care about your neighbors, your family, your community. He doesn't care about this country. He cares about himself. So I don't understand what your problem is. I just don't. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we help others work through that problem? Because you got 3.5 months to do it. Because everything these two gentlemen described is your future. Now, you may want to have to work to fix the problem on the back end, or you can try to fix it now. When I had a conversation with Joe Biden in 2020, as the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, one of the hardest things I had to do, because I chose to be a Republican. Now, folks, I grew up in Washington, D.C. And at 17 years old, on the heels of Watergate, the sexual revolution, the Vietnam War, this young black kid decided he was going to be a Republican in Washington, D.C. Now, you haven't lived until you've been a black Roman Catholic conservative from Washington, D.C. So I made the choice at 17 years old to do this. So in 2020, when I'm having a conversation with the then former vice president who's running for president of the United States about whether or not I would support his candidacy for the presidency as the former chairman of the Republican Party, you know who I thought about? That 17-year-old kid. Not the party, not the politics. But what would I say to that 17-year-old kid in that moment? And why and how would I explain to him the choice I had to make? And in that conversation with myself, I realized I could never put anything above my country. I could never put anyone above my country. So why would I start to do that now? Why would I fall back on having been the former chairman? Why would I fall back on being a Republican when I clearly saw the direction my party was going? So I asked myself the same question I just asked you. What the hell's wrong with you? Why are you struggling with this? You know what you have to do. Because the founders are requiring you to do it. Because the Constitution and the words on that parchment demand that you do it. And that thing you must do is to defend your country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to help others in that struggle. So that's what I'm here to ask you to do. Work it out with yourself. Ask yourself, because I listened to some folks say, I can't vote for a Democrat. Okay, I couldn't either. And then I realized I had to, because it was the only way I was going to fix the problem in front of me, because this was the choice that was given to me. I made my choice in the primary and someone else emerged. So now this is my choice. This is what I'm going into the battle with this fall, at that time in 2020. The same is true now. So work it out. Because you have to. Your country is asking you to do that much. You cannot give up on us. You cannot give up on us. And I know it's not easy. Right now, the Republican Party that I led, in which I was a county chairman, a state chairman, an elected official, needs the biggest political enema it has ever seen. And the only way they get it is if we give it to them. And the only way we give it to them is by our vote. Their hubris right now is suffocating. They've decided the outcome of this election. They've told us, Don Jr. was quoted earlier this evening, if Daddy loses, it's because y'all cheated. Right? Election's decided already. They're setting you up right now. They're setting you up to believe that all the polls have Daddy leading. Daddy Trump's leading. Right? So if he loses in November, fraud. Insurrection Part 2. Well, you know what's wrong with that thinking? Have you voted yet? Ma'am, have you voted yet? Have you voted yet? No. Sir, have you voted yet? Ma'am, have you voted? Has anyone in this room voted yet? No. Oh, wait, you mean to tell me the polls could be wrong because you haven't actually cast a vote? The polls aren't telling you shit. Except what a small group of people are thinking on July, fill in the date, at whatever hour they were contacted, asked a question on their way to the beach. You will ultimately decide the answer. And so all of this right now is a lot of noise signifying trouble. And what we have to do is stand on our principles first. Like what I did there? Right? But it is the most important ground you can stand on, because when you do, oh my God, when you do, guess what? You can do the right thing. You get to answer that question so much easier. That act is not as hard because the principle is driving you to do the right thing. The principle, the idea of what we're here for and why we link arms as communities, as neighbors and friends and colleagues and family is about the idea that the founders, as flawed as they were, had about this crazy little place called America, where they said straight up, we the people. Baby, you got the power. Why the hell are you giving it away? Why the hell are you just sitting on it? Why the hell don't you embrace it and use it? Because we, the people, have the power. And that power is grounded in the principles and the ideas of this great country. It doesn't matter whether you are a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or what. There's a thread that runs through all of that, that connects us, that we hold on to at a moment of crisis. Our grandparents did it in World War II. Our great-great-grandparents did it in the Civil War. And generations before did it when they came onto these shores and decided to start 13 little colonies and hoped for the best. That thread is the thread that we need to hold on to right now. That thread is what's going to bind us together to do the right thing for the country in November. I know it's a lift. I know it's a lift. Joe Biden got COVID today. Oh my God, here we go. But you know what? Joe Biden can be in his underwear sitting in the corner drooling with COVID and I'd still vote for him. Because I know however much Joe Biden is filled with COVID and however old he is, that he will still try to do his very best for my family and my community. And he's not going to say to my sons, I want to be your retribution. By the way, what the hell do you think that means? Seriously.
Terrified to find out.
This is not, it's not a glib throwaway. If I told you that I'm going to be the enforcer, would you be worried? You should be. If I told you that I want you to give me power so I can be a dictator, would you do it? Would you do it? Why not? I'm the former Republican National Committee Chairman. Why can't I have that power if I run for office as governor or anything else? What the hell's wrong with you? When someone tells you who they are and what they want to do, why are you questioning it? Why are you saying to yourself, oh no, he doesn't mean that. That's not going to happen. Well, putting 5,000 kids in cages, you didn't think that was going to happen, did you? That happened. So look, I think we have to be serious in this moment. And I know it's not easy for folks. And I'm not even here to tell you how to vote. I'm just telling you, you just can't sit this one out. You just can't. You got to work it out. And you got to ask yourself, what's wrong with me that I can't work it out? When I see what's in front of me. Project 2025, folks, is real. I had sat on my set on the weekend show with the chairman, with the president of Heritage sitting right next to me, telling me about the plan to fire 50,000 plus federal employees. Why? Because they decided, because they wrote a check to a Democrat, that their government service is no longer wanted. So my question was, well, when you replace those 50,000 government employees with your rocked rib Republican MAGA supporters of Donald Trump, do you fire them because they wrote a check to him? Think it through. They're telling you one thing while they do something else. That's the tip of the future that you're banking on not happening. Because it's going to happen. They wrote it out in 920 pages. And they proudly put it on their website and annotated the bitch. And you still act like they're not serious. Think it through. So, that's all I got to say. Because the rest of it's on you. I know what I'm doing. I've worked it out. I know what's important. I've talked it through. And I'm ready to go out and try to fight for this country because I believe in it more than my party. Because my party's in the shitter right now. And I'm geared up for that fight later on. Oh, baby, it's going to be a good one. I'm ready for that, along with this brother right here and so many others. George Conway, I saw my brother George, got my man George back here. We're ready to engage. I hope you are. But it begins by what you do now, in this moment. Because the moments after this could be terrifying. No exaggeration. None. So, I'm good. I hope you're good. If you're not, get good now. And do the right thing this November.
We're going to keep you up here. We're going to keep you up here. Thank you. And keep clapping for our next panelist. He'll make his way up here. Please join me in welcoming for our final discussion here. He's a consummate lawyer, a writer. You've seen his writings. You've also seen his tweets. He's a prolific tweeter. He's great at that. He's also just hilarious. So we're thrilled to have him here. He's a great friend of Principles First, someone I greatly admire and respect as well. Please welcome Mr. George Conway.
He works for the law firm I spent 30 years at, and I can't believe they let him out to do this.
Oh, all right. We'll do a few questions. Yeah, no comment on it. So let's start with you, George. We'll just do a couple questions, and we'll open it up for conversation. Rule of law, obviously, key principle. The Constitution. No one's above the law. This is one that I think a lot of people in this room are concerned about. You followed obviously the case in New York, documents case. You've been sort of all over these. What is your impression of where the cases stand? What have the problems been? Is there any hope that he will be held accountable? Should we be concerned about the state of our courts and our judiciary? We know Donald Trump has sort of had the courts and judges and juries in the crosshairs from the very beginning of all this. How do you see the state of play? Where do you think we stand?
Thanks for that great introduction. It reminds me, my situation here reminds me of something that one of my former law partners at our law firm once said to a court when he came up after 7 lawyers had argued. I feel like Zsa Zsa Gabor's 9th husband. I know what to do, but I don't know how to make it interesting. Anyway, the answer is simple, is that I have always believed that the courts were not going to save us from Donald Trump. Okay? I've never believed, there's all these allegations that from the people down the street that, the Democrats are engaging in lawfare, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're saying we're the law and order party, but let's leave that aside. This is about, you know, the criminal cases against Donald Trump are just that. They're criminal cases. They are not there to save the republic. We have to save the republic. Voters have to save the republic. Okay? And after he is defeated, that's when these cases will still proceed. And I have faith in the judicial system. It may take a long time, but I believe, as I think the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. The courts are that way. They don't always get it right, and they often take a long time. But these cases, you know, as we saw in New York, where a very fine judge and a brave jury of 12 ordinary citizens held Donald Trump to account for his criminal violations of New York law. And I have no doubt that if he's tried, particularly on the January 6th case, and if he's tried on the documents case that's going to have to go up on appeal and then back again, he'll be convicted on those as well. But it's kind of fitting. We have to be the ones who make that happen by making sure that he is not sworn in as President of the United States on January 20th, 2025.
Come back to you. We're here, obviously, you used to run this show across the street. I mean, just kind of open-ended question, what do you make of it? I mean, like, what is the state of the party right now? What are their thinking politically? Are they in a good position? I mean, what are they thinking over there, and what are they trying to do?
Yeah, very quickly on that. As I said before, the mindset right now, particularly after the events starting from the debate to the present moment, has been one of accelerated excitement and sort of the vision that all the pieces have fallen into place. I've heard in my text messages from some of my friends in the MAGA world, and they send me stuff like, actually on the day the Donald Trump was shot, I got a text from one brother who said, that's it, we've won. And my response back to him was, dude, seriously, that's your go-to in this moment? Former president's been shot? And you're celebrating it as a political win this November for your tribe, for your MAGA community? And then he was silent. And it told me that I'd struck a nerve with him. And I think it's important that we strike those nerves as often as we can, to remind them that this race has to be won. The race has to be run. And no single event is going to determine the outcome of this election, except for one: what you do on election day. That's it. And so right now, the energy is in that space. The party writ large, to both Charlie Sykes and Joe's point, is done. I don't recognize it. I'm not welcome there. I would dare say none of you are welcome there. If Liz Cheney isn't welcome there, you know you've reached a whole nother level of crazy inside the room. So that evolution, in one sense, is complete. But understand, and I think it's important to put context here, Donald Trump was just the guy who kind of brought it to its magical end. He made it interesting and entertaining and sort of confirmed this is the way to go. The party had been dancing in this space for quite some time, going back to the late 1950s, actually even going back to the 1930s. Republicans have always had this sort of dance with this ugly side of populism and fascism. The 1930s, you look at the Republicans who were advocating Nazism. The 1950s, the John Birch Society. Lincoln's very cynical Southern strategy. in the 1968 campaign, deliberately luring in white segregationist men who were outdone that Johnson signed the civil rights and voting rights legislation. The moral majority sort of coming in the first time the Republican Party put a social issue in its plank in 1980. That was the bargain that Reagan made, because people forget Reagan was not liked by Republicans in 1976. He lost in that fight against Ford. The establishment in the Northeast, where the party was anchored, did not like this Western governor from California and did everything they could to stop him. Reagan figured out a strategy and a pathway back, and the moral majority was emerging in the South, the sort of Christian political arm that was beginning to emerge. Embrace that, cut the deal. I'll put your plank in our platform if you line up your support. The deal was done, he wins. And we have been playing in that space ever since. And those social issues, which the party for a long time, Heath and George, you both know, were not central to the advocacy. It was about what we've all talked about, liberty. Well, liberty means you do you, boo, I do me, right? Now, if the government tries to come in between us, that's when we're gonna step up and we're gonna raise some noise. But aside from that, the party's view has largely been culturally, let folks and communities work that out. More broadly, we want to keep the federal government at bay so that citizens can figure out the free markets, et cetera. That party is gone. It is now about the culture wars. It is now about the dictates of not Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't care about abortion. Donald Trump doesn't care about gay and lesbian issues. What Donald Trump cares about, do you love me right now? Will you love me 10 minutes from now? And will you love me an hour from now? Others are taking advantage of that, and I think that's where the rot really sets in.
Just one question, and this is sort of a two-part question for both of you, and then we'll open it up for questions, so be thinking. George, you know Donald Trump. You like personally, even before he did all this, I think you were familiar with him. You kind of were close to his initial campaign, like some of the other folks here, maybe even voted for him in 2016. And I'm just curious, having been close to his entourage and inside the circle, you know, there's some thoughts, and I think people continue out there to kind of convince themselves maybe that, yeah, if he gets elected this time, maybe he'll put in, you know, it's all about the people around him. He's not that interested in governing, so maybe if just somehow the right people get around him, he'll put good people in right positions. So it's important to get in there, and it'll be not as bad as we think. Can we just war game for a second? I know it's not comfortable to think about, but assume he wins. Do you have any confidence that his picks will be better than last time? Or will he be worse? Will he just double down and think, now I've got no, you know, this is my last 4 years or however many years I can make it? You know, should we be concerned about that? Second question, what is the biggest threat that keeps you up at night about a Donald Trump presidency? Like, what is the number one thing that, like, he's going to do that, and, you know, we're going to be in a dire state? Just put both of those together.
Well, answering the second first, there isn't any one thing. And as you correctly note, I mean, I started out by supporting Trump. In fact, my ex-wife, who is down the street, is giving a speech tonight in support of Donald Trump. And to me, what you know, my feeling about Trump in 2016 was, well, gosh, we don't want Hillary. Oh my gosh, Scalia died. Oh my gosh, we got to win. And you know, I kind of ignored a lot of the negative things that were being said about Trump, because I couldn't believe, you know, he couldn't possibly be that bad. I projected, you know, this psychological projection. People project negative qualities. I projected positive qualities onto him, and that was a big mistake. I just assumed that he was normal. And fundamentally, after he got into office, the thing that drove me away from Trump and into becoming an opponent, and an active opponent of Trump, notwithstanding my ex-wife, who was going into the White House every day, was I couldn't figure out what was wrong with this man. Something is wrong with this man. Why does he keep doing the things that he does? Why, he's elected president of the United States, he's sworn in as president of the United States, and he's fencing about whether he had a bigger crowd, which he clearly did not, than Barack Obama did, the first black president, on a sunny day, and he had a rainy day. It's like, what is wrong with him? And it bothered me. I turned down a position in the Justice Department because I just felt there's something wrong here, and I couldn't figure it out. And then one day, I read something that opened my eyes. I read an article in Rolling Stone magazine, and it was about whether Donald Trump has narcissistic personality disorder. And if you go back, you have to remember, the people who warned us most clearly about Trump in 2015 and 2016 were two groups. People who understood history, like military types, diplomats, scholars of history and government, and the psychologists. And there's a reason for that. Donald Trump is a narcissistic sociopath. That's why he's dangerous. That's why we have to take everything he says and does and assume the worst. And what happened to me was, I was just puzzling about it, and I read that article and I started reading more. And basically, his personality characteristics, his illnesses, these are disorders that you can find in what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. These are the very same disorders that cult leaders have, Jim Jones, for example, and that evil, dangerous, murderous dictators have. And don't take my word for it. I should have, because I'm going to be talking about this a lot, and I hope to do it with Michael very soon. I'm going to be carrying this around a lot. These are the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm not going to go through those because basically no one disputes that he's a freaking narcissist. Here's the worst. These are the diagnostic criteria for sociopathy, antisocial personality disorder. Okay? When you combine these two, okay, this explains everything about Donald Trump. It explains his criminality, the fact that he's a rapist, that he's a convicted felon, that he tried to overthrow democracy. Explains his love for authoritarianism, his desire for vengeance. It explains his racism, his misogyny. Everything comes down to the fact that he is a narcissistic sociopath. Okay, and let's go through this. Here are the criteria. This is something we need to show people because it's not complicated. Okay, this is stuff, if you can read and write. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a shrink. You can read this, and we've been watching Donald Trump for what, 9 years now? 9 years. We know more about him and his behavior than any other human being on this planet. Okay? Now, here are the criteria. It only takes 3 of these criteria to show that someone has antisocial personality disorder and is a sociopath. 3, failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors. Ding, check, right? 34 counts. Adjudicated rapist. Need I go on? 88 counts he's been indicted on. 2, deceitfulness, as indicated by repeated lying. Gosh, is that one? That one doesn't seem too hard, does it? Okay? And in fact, look at this one. Look at this. It's like use of aliases as part of that. You remember when he was a businessman in New York, he used to pretend he was someone else to call up newspaper reporters to say nice things about himself. Okay? And he's just, you know, 30, the Washington Post counted 30,000 lies in 4 years. Okay, that's 2. So we only got 1 more, guys, only 1 more. 3, impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. I mean, you know, all these people in the White House in the first term were talking about, will he have good people? That's what they were fighting, the impulsivity. What's he gonna do tomorrow? What's he gonna do 5 minutes from now after I leave the Oval? Okay, he's absolutely impulsive. Okay, we're done. But we got more. 4, irritability and aggressiveness as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. Oh, ask these women, dozens of women, whether he assaults people. Ask the Secret Service agent in the car on January 6th when he tried to attack the Secret Service agent because he wouldn't take him up to Capitol Hill to join the insurrection he fomented. Okay, 4. So we're at 4 or 7. We're way ahead. So much winning. 5, reckless disregard for safety of others. Where do I start with that? Oh, let the people in with the guns through the mags because they're not after me, right? I mean, it's just and talking about the Second Amendment, people doing something to Hillary Clinton. I mean, where does this stop? This recklessness stops. His language. Okay, he does not care whether he foments violence. He does not care. Okay, 5. Okay, we did that. 6, consistent irresponsibility as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior. Oh yeah, he read all those briefing books he stole and brought to Mar-a-Lago, right? And, honor financial obligations. Okay. 7, lack of remorse as indicated by being indifferent or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. 7 of 7. Okay, now you don't have to be a doctor, okay? We can't diagnose, we are not doctors. But look at these. I mean, even if you say, well, I don't know, maybe he doesn't have 4, he's got 7. And are these the traits you want to see in someone with power of any sort over anyone at any place at any time, let alone having the 2nd largest nuclear arsenal on the planet, let alone being entrusted with the Constitution and laws of the United States? That's what is at issue here, and that is why he's a danger. He does not care about anyone but himself. He is only about himself, and all he exists to do, everything he does is about getting revenge and promoting himself. And that's why everything we've talked about tonight comes down to this. He's nuts. You got an old guy, you got another old guy. You got a guy who slurs words, you got a guy who slurs words. You got a guy who, mistakes names, got a guy who mistakes names. One of them is a complete whack job. And we need to start talking about this because it literally explains everything, including the danger to our country.
I got nothing. Yeah, I got nothing. I got nothing. I'm good.
Questions? Right in the back there.
We've been having enough trouble garnering opposition to him with all of those characteristics. And what do we do when we're faced with J.D. Vance in 4 years?
We don't want to face J.D. Vance. Listen, Vance has his own issues. He is an opportunist. There's something wrong with him too, that he could say in one lifetime that, oh, Donald Trump was evil, and then go the other way after seeing all the evidence and saying that he isn't. But he's not the problem. Okay? This man is the problem as long as he is in charge. And we have to focus on him. J.D. Vance is, to me, is just not important.
Yeah, we'll keep getting more questions in. Yeah.
That leads to my you're an insider, you were an insider. How many people, because I was working with Ted Cruz, my wife was, ex-wife was working with Ted Cruz. How many people know, but they're playing the game, because they want to keep the power?
They all know.
They all, because
They all know. They all know. I mean, I'm starting something tomorrow. It's a group, and it's going to be talking about these issues. And one of the things we're going to have is video clips of everybody saying he's nuts. His own people. In fact, his own chief of staff, General Kelly, once brought, there was a book written by, that was a compendium of essays written by dozens of psychiatrists and psychologists who wanted to warn the public that Donald Trump, because of his issues, was a danger to society and a danger to the republic. And John Kelly bought that book because he thought it would help him deal with Donald Trump. Okay? You heard Bill Barr, I mean, you know, he was talking recently saying that, you know, the country shouldn't be a therapy session for this disturbed man. You've heard Nikki Haley just months ago basically questioning his mental health. They all know he's nuts. And that is one of the, you know, the biggest, you know, I talk about Donald Trump telling 30,000 lies in office, and it's really a remarkable thing. I mean, so much winning. I mean, it's incredible how he does that. But the biggest lie that was told, and the most dangerous lie that was told over these last few years, has been by everybody who supports him, who says he's not what they know him to be.
Okay, so that was my thing too. How do we make sure that this whole bunch of leadership who enable Donald Trump, whether it's the future generation or what, that this never happens again, right? We can vote Donald Trump out of office, I'm all for that. But I'm worried about all the other people that have enabled him just for this tantalizing whiff of power. We gotta make sure this never happens again. What do we do?
I agree with that, but first things first, we got to deal with him. But I agree with you. As for someone who's earlier, I think it was it Charlie, who said, you know, we're going to be dealing with this for years. The damage that this man's moral and psychological sickness has caused, the permission structure that he has created, to the point of, as one of the panelists on the first panel said, you know, he's basically turned these people who consider themselves good Christians into people who do exactly the opposite of what Christ would have done. Okay? We're going to have to deal with that for a long time. But we got to start now, and we got to call out the fact that he is not well. In a normal society, this man should not be holding any position of power. He represents, and you look at those traits, both in both those charts, everything we tell our children not to be. And we need to drive that point home.
I'm a Haley delegate. What would you advise? Do we jump off the train, or do we stay on Brace for Impact and then rebuild the party after the crash?
I don't think the party can be rebuilt. I think that, as I think Charlie pointed out, you know, we are at this phase of history where one of the parties morphs into something else, and that's what's happening with the Republican Party. And you know, I want to believe that that party is not going to survive. The one down the street is not going to survive, and there'll be a vacuum, and we can start something new and old at the same time, and better. Principle, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And nice, that's a good line, that's really nice. And that's what I hope for. And I think there's, I mean, we'll take it off the high horse and highfalutin stuff. I think there are practical reasons why that could happen if Trump is defeated. I mean, basically he took, these are just practical things. He basically took the RNC and moved it down to Florida by Palm Beach Airport and merged it with his campaign. You know what happens to campaigns? I mean, Michael can tell you. What happens to campaigns after someone loses. Poof. Everybody vanishes into thin air. Okay? And then you have the state parties, which are a complete mess, where people are basically trying to strangle each other. Like, look at Michigan, Arizona. These people are at each other's throats and there are just people who don't care about winning, who just want to, be Trumpy. Okay? Those parties are imploding. So if Donald Trump loses this election, there ain't going to be a Republican Party left that's functioning in any way, shape, or form. And that, I was a Republican for, I guess, 38 years. I don't know how long. Yeah, 30, and I don't want it. This was the grand old party, the party of Lincoln. I mean, there was so much good in the party, some bad, as we talked about. I don't want to see that happen to the Republican Party, but sometimes that's what happens. And this is a political system that equilibrates with two parties. And if one disappears, something's got to rise in its place, and that's where you all come into play.
I just want to say, I don't know if you guys are all, Haley, I just see you have the lanyards on.
From Michigan.
Haley from Michigan. Thank you guys for being both at the RNC, but also here. I know it's not easy to be here and in that room sometimes, but it's important. So thank each of you for engaging in our system. That's what it takes. I mean, that's exactly what we are fighting to do. So thank you for being here. Yeah, sure.
It broke my heart yesterday to see Nikki Haley's speech because of how so much believed in her. And I'm wondering if you give a perspective, because we've talked a lot about how we fix our party system. I do business around the world. I see America's position in the world changing. I think about NATO, what's going to happen in Ukraine, what happens in November. I wonder if you give some perspective on how do we fix that and rebuild that.
I think it's a significant part of a broader conversation that I know is happening not just in NATO, but in capitals around the globe. There is a fervor of concern about a return of Trump. NATO allies are significantly put out by that prospect. Some are resigned to it. Others are hoping and trying to be as encouraging as they can to the idea of the American system, for it to sustain itself, because that's how and what sustains the alliance. But the prospects outside of the U.S. In terms of how they're looking at us right now is very, very dim. They are very concerned. The question I asked, I was during NATO week, was involved with some efforts with the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia was here, or the Prime Minister was doing some other things, and did have conversations with the Prime Minister as well. And the question was, should Trump comes in, what does NATO do? What does the G8 do? What do our allies do? Who then begins to lead and to fill in that gap? Because it is with a great deal of certainty that Donald Trump will move to take us out of NATO. He tried 3 times. 3 times. The last time that effort was put in place, the paper was taken off of his desk after signature and then put in a desk drawer somewhere else. He tried 3 times to impose the Insurrection Act, because he wanted to respond to the Black Lives Matter protests by engaging military authorities against civilian population. The last time he signed that, Bill Barr took that piece of paper off of his desk and put it in a drawer. Our allies know this, and it really kind of goes to what George was saying. They're in the room with the guy, so they see the behavior. They know what it's like, and they know what it's like to engage with him. The bullying, the bullshit that he puts out there, the cozying up to Putin. There is a raw concern about the U.S. just drop kicking Ukraine by the end of January of 2025. One of the first official acts will be a cessation of any engagement in support of Ukraine. The former president has already told us his intention. Putin, whatever you want to do, do it. As long as it don't bother me, you're good. That is a red alarm bell, fire alarm going off for a lot of our allies, because Poland and other East European countries know what's next. And so they're looking for some form of cover amongst themselves. They're not finding it. And so it's a real stress test for the allies right now. And unfortunately for them, fortunately for us, because of the way our system is designed, there's nothing they can do about it. They have to wait and see what outcome comes about in November, unlike the Russians and some other actors out there who would like to meddle in this election to get the result that they want.
Probably have time for one more, and then closing thoughts. Yeah.
I'd say glad you guys are full part of the bulwark now. Fantastic, love it. Quick question. I was one of the plaintiffs in Illinois that got Donald Trump declared an insurrectionist, and he shouldn't have been on the ballot in general, but the Supreme Court obviously did it differently. I'm no hero, but thank you. If the Democrats are able to win the House and the Senate and keep the presidency, is there a realistic chance that they could pass some sort of law that will permanently keep insurrectionists from being able to run for federal office, or has the Supreme Court made that basically impossible?
I think they could do it, basically they wanted to. Yeah. I mean, I think that was actually the point of the Supreme Court being, which otherwise didn't make any sense. They basically said there needs to be a federal statute to do that, for at least with respect to presidential candidates. How they distinguish states dealing with state candidates doesn't make any sense to me. There's a lot of things in the opinion that don't make any sense. But yeah, I mean, Congress could do that. It could pass a law that creates a process by which, that doesn't exist now, by which somebody can be excluded from the ballot as a presidential candidate because they have engaged in insurrection. Hopefully, we will never have any other candidate like that again. But we'll see.
So you convinced us Trump is ill. My question is it a significant portion of the populace ill that he has been able to take them over? And would you care to comment?
Well, that's beyond the reading that I have done. I'm going to be careful. But, when you have a bad person like this is why they have cult leaders, whether cult leaders and dictators who get elected into office. They create a permission structure. They create an environment whereby people get to behave like their worst selves. Because look, the President of the United States did that. Why can't I? Why can't I throw aside all of the moral teachings that I actually learned? Or they don't apply to me, or they don't apply to me when I'm talking about those people who are bad. That's one of the dangers of having political leadership with these disorders.
Yeah, I'll just very quickly on that. I think the key thing, I mean, you ask a very important question, because that aspect of it is not, I don't think, fully appreciated in terms of why others seemingly fall into this space. And I've in all of this, I get the political jargon around cults and all things, and I've kind of stayed away from that, because the reason I do is a lot of what Joe Walsh said. Joe leveled up in the conversation the idea that speaks to something that Alexis de Tocqueville said once, and he said, there's nothing worse than unmet expectations. And when a people feel that their expectations have not been met, that's not a good day in politics. That's not a good day for a community or a country. And so in many respects, and I can speak to this firsthand, the Republican Party leadership lied and cajoled and broke promises to its base over 40, 50 years. We're gonna get Roe versus Wade, repealed. Send in a check. Doesn't happen. We need you to come out and help us defeat the Democrats because they're gonna do all these things on education. We're gonna eliminate the Department of Education. And so, in a fashion, after a while, the base buys into that, is given the permission structure to latch on to that and to agree to it. They fund it. They march for it. They sign, wave, and door knock for those candidates. And they look 5, 10, 15 years later, and nothing's changed. And along comes a guy who pulls out a piece of paper and says, on here are the names of the people I will appoint to the Supreme Court if you make me president. And then he does it. And that deal is closed. He becomes for them the guy who kept his promise. And so all of the stuff that George has laid out, that's not what they're focused on. They're not looking at his psychopathy and his neuropathies and his illnesses or whatever else apathy he got. All they know is this guy kept his promise. And so now the question and the challenge for all of us is, how do we break into that peace? How do you break into that relationship to show, yeah, he kept his promise, but here are the consequences of that promise. And that's the tough part. That's the work part. That's this part that we have to get ourselves together around going forward. Because you're not going to change that between now and November. You're just not. Which is why this challenge, struggle, fight, if you will, goes beyond what happens in November. Whether Republicans win or lose, that's the J.D. Vance play. J.D. Vance plotted his way to this position after he realized the only way I'm going to get to the United States Senate is to compromise my principles and go against everything I believe in. And it worked. And now he's the VP nominee. That's the dangerous part here. Everyone's going to find the benefit for them in all of this on the dark side of this without thinking about the consequences for the country. And that's where our work begins.
Please join me in giving these two guys a round of applause, and all of our speakers a round of applause. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. That concludes the program. You're free to mingle about. I think we got to be out of here at like 8:30ish or now. Oh, we got to be out of here now. I just want to say one plug to make. If you enjoyed this discussion, please join us in Washington, D.C., February 21 through February 23 in 2025. We do basically our own CPAC. The same weekend as CPAC, 2-3 days basically of what you saw tonight. We find everyone in the country and we bring them to D.C. so that they can meet each other. And it's just a really impactful weekend and we want you to be a part of it. Thank you for being here. Safe travels back home. And go vote.